Aaliyah should have ignored the call. Because the moment she answered, the Korean Mafia found her. One wrong number, two dead hitmen, and a billionaire monster who says I'm his. I thought I was answering a stray call in a New York taxi. I didn't know I was intercepting a death warrant. Now, the city's most ruthless Korean Mafia boss has tracked me down, not to kill me but to claim me. Finn Park doesn't take no for an answer, and he doesn't share his toys. He says he's my only hope for survival, but as his obsession grows, I realize the real danger isn't the men hunting me. It's the man holding the leash. Let me know in the comments what country you're watching from. If this video touched you, please like, share, and subscribe to the channel for more emotional and inspiring stories. Your support means the world to me. The burner phone was a sleek silver relic, vibrating against the cracked wood of Aaliyah's nightstand at 3 a.m. She shouldn't have picked it up. She knew it the moment her fingers grazed the cold casing. But curiosity was a dangerous thing for a woman living alone in a city that thrived on secrets. "Hello," she whispered, her voice thick with sleep. There was a heavy silence on the other end, then a voice like crushed velvet and broken glass. "The shipment is at Pier 42. Code Crimson. If the girl is there, kill her. If she isn't, find her." Aaliyah's heart hammered against her ribs. "You have the wrong." Click. The line went dead. Aaliyah stared at the screen, her breath hitching. She wasn't a criminal. She was a graphic designer with a penchant for overpriced lattes and a quiet life. But as she looked out her window, she saw it. A black SUV idling across the street, its headlights flickering once. Then twice. They weren't just looking for the girl anymore. They had found her. She scrambled out of bed, grabbing her coat and the burner phone. She didn't call the police. In New York, the police were just another gang in uniform. She needed to run. She didn't know that 3 miles away, in a penthouse overlooking the skyline, Finn was watching her GPS signal blink on his monitor. "Run as fast as you can, Aaliyah," Finn murmured, swirling a glass of amber liquid. "It only makes the hunt more interesting." The elevator felt like a slow-moving coffin. Aaliyah watched the floor numbers countdown. 4, 3, 2, her pulse drumming a frantic rhythm in her ears. She burst through the lobby, ignoring the startled look from the night doorman, and plunged into the biting New York chill. She didn't take her car. A car was a tracking device on wheels. Instead, she ducked into the subway entrance at 23rd Street, disappearing into the subterranean heat and the smell of ozone. She hopped onto a departing L train just as the doors hissed shut, catching a glimpse of a man in a charcoal suit standing on the platform. He didn't chase her. He just watched, his hand pressed to an earpiece. Safe, she had to be safe. She spent the next 3 hours switching lines, doubling back, and finally taking a gray market bus across the border into New Jersey. She ended up at a dive motel called the Sleepy Willow, paying cash for a room that smelled of stale cigarettes and regret. She sat on the edge of the bed, the burner phone heavy in her pocket. Why her? Why that phone? She pulled it out, scrolling through the call logs. Only one number was saved, labeled simply as K. Her thumb hovered over the screen. Before she could decide, the phone buzzed. A text message appeared. "I like the red coat, Aaliyah, but it makes you too easy to spot. Lock the deadbolt." Aaliyah froze. She was wearing her red wool trench coat. She looked at the grimy window, the curtains torn at the edges. She wasn't alone. She never had been. Aaliyah lunged for the door, her fingers fumbling with the deadbolt, but the wood groaned before she could slide the metal home. The door didn't burst open. It opened slowly, with a terrifying, deliberate pressure. A man stepped into the dim light of the motel room. He was tall, impossibly so, filling the space with a predatory grace. His suit was tailored to perfection, hugging broad shoulders, and his hair was ink black, swept back from a face that looked carved from cold marble. "You're a difficult woman to track, Aaliyah," he said. His voice was the same one from the phone, velvet and glass. "Who are you? How did you find me?" Aaliyah backed away until her calves hit the bed, her hand reaching for a heavy glass ashtray on the nightstand. "I am the man who owns the phone you're holding," he said, stepping into the circle of light. "And I found you because I own the air you're breathing right now. My name is Finn." He didn't look like a thug, he looked like a king. But the way his eyes raked over her, possessive, hungry, and entirely too focused, made her skin itch. "I'm going to scream," she threatened, her voice trembling. Finn tilted his head, a ghost of a smirk playing on his lips. "Go ahead, but the manager is currently unconscious, and the two men who were sent here to kill you are currently in the trunk of my car. I suggest you find a different way to thank me." "Kill me?" Aaliyah's voice cracked. "I don't even know what code crimson means. Take the phone, take it and leave me alone." She threw the burner phone at his chest. Finn caught it with one hand, his movements blurringly fast. He stepped closer, invading her personal space until she was forced to look up at him. The scent of sandalwood and expensive gin clouded her senses. "It's too late for that," Finn murmured. He reached out, his gloved thumb tracing the line of her jaw. Aaliyah shivered, but she couldn't pull away. His touch was a command. "You heard the message. You've seen the faces of my associates. In my world, that makes you a liability or a trophy." "I am not a trophy," she snapped, finding a spark of her old fire. Finn's eyes darkened, a flash of something primal crossing his features. He leaned down, his lips brushing against her ear. "You are whatever I say you are. Right now, you are the only person who can identify the mole in my organization. That makes you the most precious thing I own." He didn't ask her to come. He simply gripped her upper arm, not enough to bruise, but enough to let her know escape was an illusion, and began leading her toward the door. "Where are you taking me?" "To my home," Finn said, his grip tightening slightly as a black sedan pulled up to the motel curb. "Where the doors only open when I say so." The drive back to Manhattan was silent and suffocating. Finn sat in the back seat with her, his presence a physical weight. He didn't look at her. He looked at his own phone, barking orders in rapid-fire Korean. Yet every time Aaliyah shifted or looked toward the window, his hand would find hers, pinning her palm to the leather seat. It wasn't a hand-hold, it was a lockdown. They arrived at a sprawling penthouse in Tribeca. The elevator opened directly into a living space of glass, steel, and shadows. "This is your room," Finn said, gesturing to a door guarded by two silent, stone-faced men. "I want to go home, Finn, please." Finn turned to her, his expression softening into something even more dangerous, pity. He walked toward her, forcing her back against the floor-to-ceiling window. Behind her, the city lights twinkled like fallen stars. In front of her, there was only the abyss of his dark eyes. "This is your home now, Aaliyah," he whispered, his hand coming up to rest on her throat, his thumb feeling the frantic leap of her pulse. "You'll have everything you desire, clothes, food, protection, but you do not leave. You do not speak to anyone but me." He leaned in, his nose brushing hers. "You thought you were running from the mafia, little bird, but you ran straight into the cage." He backed away, locking the door from the outside with a heavy thud. Aaliyah was alone in a room of gold, realizing with a jolt of terror that the code crimson call hadn't just ruined her life, it had started a new one. And Finn was the only god in it. The room was a masterpiece of cold luxury. Silk sheets, a closet filled with designer labels that still had the tags on them, all in her exact size, and a vanity stocked with perfumes that cost more than her monthly rent. Finn hadn't just kidnapped her, he had curated a life for her. Aaliyah spent the first morning packing the perimeter. Every door was locked. The windows were reinforced, overlooking a sheer drop to the Hudson River. When the door finally clicked open at noon, it wasn't a maid. It was Finn. He carried a tray with a single black rose and a glass of water. He set it on the table, his eyes tracking the way her silk robe, one he had chosen, slid off her shoulder. "Eat," he commanded. "I'm not a pet, Finn," she snapped. though her stomach betrayed her with a loud growl. "Pets are replaceable," Finn said, walking toward her with a slow, predatory gait. He stopped inches away, his shadow swallowing her. "You are an investment. My enemies think they can use you to get to me. They don't realize that once I lay claim to something, I don't let go, not ever." He reached out, tucking a stray lock of her hair behind her ear. His fingers were cold, but his gaze was scorching. "Do you understand? You belong to the House of Park now, my house." By day 3, the isolation began to wear her down. Finn was a ghost, always watching via the cameras she knew were hidden in the corners but rarely appearing. When he did, it was always at night. Tonight, he smelled of rain and gunpowder. He entered the room and didn't say a word, merely sat in the velvet armchair and watched her. "What do you want from me?" Aaliyah whispered, clutching a pillow to her chest. "I want to see the woman who dared to answer my phone," Finn said, his voice dropping to a low, dangerous register. "Most people would have dropped it and run. You listened. You remembered. You have a fire in you, Aaliyah. I'm going to use that fire to burn down the men who tried to take you." He stood up and walked to the bed, his presence overwhelming. He leaned over her, his hands pinning the mattress on either side of her head. The obsessed look in his eyes was unmistakable now, a mixture of protection and terrifying possession. "Tomorrow we go to the council," he murmured, his lips inches from hers. "You will stay by my side. You will not speak. You will look at no one but me. If a man looks at you for too long, I'll take his eyes. Understood?" Aaliyah nodded, her breath hitching. She hated him, yet she found herself leaning into his heat. It was a survival instinct she didn't recognize. The council was held in the basement of a nondescript dry cleaner in Chinatown. Behind the racks of steaming clothes lay a door of reinforced steel. Inside, the air was thick with cigar smoke and the tension of a dozen high-ranking lieutenants. When Finn walked in with Aaliyah on his arm, the room went silent. Aaliyah felt the weight of their stares, hard, judgmental, and hungry. Finn's grip on her waist tightened until it was almost painful. He pulled her flush against his side, a clear signal to every man in the room. "Mine." "This is the girl?" an older man asked, his eyes scanning Aaliyah like a piece of meat. "She's the one who heard the code." "She is my witness," Finn said, his voice ringing out like a gavel. "And she is under my personal protection. Anyone who looks at her without my permission is challenging me." The older man chuckled. "You're getting soft, Finn, obsessing over a civilian. She's a liability." Finn didn't argue. He moved faster than Aaliyah could track. In a heartbeat, he had a silver dagger pressed against the older man's throat. "She isn't a liability," Finn hissed. "She's the reason you're all still alive. Now tell me who authorized the Crimson Call, or I start carving." The violence was swift and brutal. Finn didn't kill the man, but the message was sent. As they were ushered back to the car, Aaliyah's legs felt like jelly. She had seen the boss Finn, the man who ruled with iron and blood. Once the car doors closed, she turned on him. "You're a monster. You almost killed him right in front of me." Finn didn't flinch. He grabbed her wrists, pinning them to the leather seat above her head. He was breathing hard, the adrenaline of the fight still coursing through him. "I did that for you," he roared. "They wanted to dispose of you, Aaliyah. The only reason you aren't at the bottom of the East River right now is because I made them fear me more than they want you dead." His anger shifted, turning into something darker and more desperate. He pressed his body against hers, his face buried in the crook of her neck. "I can't let them have you. I won't. You're the only thing in this city that doesn't smell like rot." He bit her shoulder, not hard enough to bleed but enough to leave a mark. "A claim." Aaliyah gasped, her anger melting into a terrifying, electric heat. Back at the penthouse, the tension between them snapped. Finn didn't lock her in her room this time. He followed her in, slamming the door behind him. The room was dark, lit only by the city lights. Aaliyah turned to face him, her heart thundering. "You can't keep me like this, Finn. I'm not yours to own." "Aren't you?" Finn stepped closer, his fingers unknotting his silk tie. "Who fed you? Who clothed you? Who saved your life twice in 48 hours?" He reached out, his hands sliding behind her neck, drawing her forward until their foreheads touched. "You think you want freedom, Aaliyah, but freedom is cold. Freedom is being alone in that motel room with a hitman at the door." He kissed her then, a hard, punishing collision of lips and teeth. It wasn't a request, it was a conquest. To her horror and shame, Aaliyah found herself kissing him back, her fingers tangling in his dark hair. Finn groaned against her mouth, a sound of pure, unadulterated obsession. "I found you," he whispered against her skin, "and God help anyone who tries to take you back." Aaliyah woke to the sound of a closing door. The sun was bleeding through the floor-to-ceiling windows, casting long, golden shadows across the silk sheets. For a moment, she forgot where she was, until she felt the lingering heat on her skin and the faint, bruised sensation on her shoulder where Finn had claimed her. She sat up, wrapping the duvet around her chest. On the nightstand sat a velvet box and a new phone. Not a burner this time, but a top-of-the-line device, encased in gold. Inside the box was a diamond tennis bracelet. There was no note, but she didn't need one. It was a collar made of ice. She picked up the phone. It was locked except for one contact, Finn. She tried to dial out to call her mother or the police, but the screen flashed a message: access denied, internal network only. He hadn't just taken her body, he had erased her connection to the world. She was a ghost living in a palace, and the ghost was starting to like the haunting. Restlessness drove her to explore the parts of the penthouse Finn usually kept locked. While he was away at business, she now knew involved a high body count. She found his private study. The room smelled of old paper and expensive tobacco. Finn's desk was a massive slab of obsidian. Driven by a desperate need to understand why her life had been dismantled, she sat in his chair. It was still warm. She scrolled through his tablet, which he had carelessly, or perhaps arrogantly, left unlocked. She found a folder titled Crimson. Inside were photos of her, not just from the last few days, but from weeks ago. Photos of her at the grocery store, at her office, laughing with friends. Finn hadn't found her because she answered that phone. He had been watching her long before the call. The wrong number wasn't an accident. It was a lure. "You weren't supposed to see that yet," a voice echoed from the doorway. Aaliyah bolted upright, the tablet slipping from her hands. Finn stood in the doorway, his coat draped over his arm, looking like a god of vengeance. "You stalked me," she whispered, her voice trembling. "The phone. You put it in that taxi, didn't you? You knew I'd pick it up." Finn walked into the room, his expression unreadable. He didn't deny it. He sat on the edge of the desk, towering over her. "The underworld was closing in on you, Aaliyah. Your father owed a debt to the triads that he couldn't pay. They were coming for you to settle it." "My father is a teacher in Ohio." "Your father is a gambler who used your life as collateral 10 years ago," Finn countered, his voice cold and factual. "I bought your debt. I didn't stalk you. I guarded my investment until it was time to bring you home." "Home?" she cried, standing up. "This is a kidnapping." Finn grabbed her waist, pulling her between his knees. He looked up at her with an intensity that made her lungs seize. "I saved you from a life of slavery. I gave you a throne. Now you're going to thank me for it." The revelation shattered Aaliyah's reality. Everything she thought she knew about her family was a lie, and the only person telling her the truth was a man who kept her in a cage. "I want to speak to him," Aaliyah demanded. "I want to hear it from my father." "He's gone, Aaliyah. He fled the country the moment I took over your contract," Finn said, his grip on her softening into a caress. "There is no one left but me, no one who cares if you breathe, no one who will keep you safe." He leaned forward, his forehead resting against her stomach. It was a gesture of submission that felt more like a trap. "I've spent 3 years making sure no other man touched you. You think I'm going to let you walk away now?" He was obsessed. It wasn't just a whim, it was a long-term operation. Every coincidence of her life over the last few years had been orchestrated by Finn. "You're insane," she breathed. "I'm devoted," he corrected, looking up at her with dark, swirling eyes. The argument was cut short by the sound of glass shattering in the main salon. Finn was on his feet in a second, pulling a suppressed pistol from his waistband. "Get in the panic room, now," he ordered. But it was too late. The lights flickered and died, plunging the penthouse into a terrifying crimson emergency glow. The Crimson Protocol wasn't just a code, it was an invasion. Men in tactical gear swarmed the balcony, crashing through the reinforced glass. These weren't Finn's men. They were the triads, coming to reclaim the collateral Finn had stolen from them. Finn shoved Aaliyah behind him, his arm acting as a human shield. "Stay down." He began to fire, the rhythmic thud-thud-thud of his gun echoing in the small room. He was a whirlwind of lethal precision, but there were too many of them. For the first time, Aaliyah saw a flicker of fear in Finn's eyes, not for himself, but for her. "If they take you," he hissed between shots, "I will burn this entire city to find you. Do you hear me? You are mine." In the chaos of the firefight, the balcony became a slaughterhouse. Finn was a shadow among shadows, his movements jagged and lethal. But as he turned to reload, a flashbang grenade skittered across the marble floor. White noise, nothing. When Aaliyah's vision cleared, Finn was struggling with two men, his face contorted in a snarl of rage she'd never seen. He was losing ground. This was her chance. She didn't head for the panic room, she headed for the service elevator. She stripped off the diamond bracelet, dropping the glittering collar onto the floor. It was a breadcrumb she hoped he'd follow later. For now, she needed to disappear. She hit the basement level, heart hammering against her ribs like a trapped bird. She burst into the humid night of the alleyway, the smell of trash and rain hitting her like a slap. She didn't go to the bus station. She didn't go to her friends. She went to the one place a girl like her wasn't supposed to exist, the deep Bronx, into a community that looked like her, where a black woman could blend into the rhythm of the streets and vanish. Aaliyah had dyed her hair, swapped her silk robes for oversized hoodies, and was working cash under the table at a 24-hour laundromat. She slept in a room the size of a closet above a grocery store. Every time a black SUV rolled by, her heart stopped. Every time a man with dark hair walked in, she gripped the pocketknife she'd bought for $10. She was free, but the freedom tasted like copper. She missed the sandalwood scent of his skin. She hated herself for it. She hated that she looked at the door every time it opened, half expecting, half hopping to see those obsidian eyes. She thought she had been clever. She had used 3 different burner phones, never stayed in the same place for more than 2 nights, and moved only during the morning rush. She was a master of the hide-in-plain-sight technique. She didn't know that Finn wasn't looking for a girl. He was looking for a heartbeat. It happened on a Tuesday at 4 a.m. The laundromat was empty, the fluorescent lights humming a lonely tune. Aaliyah was folding a pile of towels when the bell above the door chimed. She didn't look up. "We're closing in 10 minutes. "I told you, Aaliyah, I like the red coat better." The towel dropped from her hands. The voice was deeper than she remembered, rougher, as if he hadn't slept in the 14 days she'd been gone. Finn stood by the vending machine, looking utterly out of place in his $3,000 suit amidst the grime of the Bronx. He looked thinner, more feral. His hand was bandaged, and there was a fresh scar cutting through his left eyebrow. "How?" she whispered, backing away until she hit the hot metal of a dryer. "You left the bracelet," Finn said, stepping into the light. He pulled the diamonds from his pocket, the stones catching the sickly yellow light. "I told you I bought your debt. Did you think I wouldn't track the movement of the money I used to find you?" "Get away from me," Aaliyah warned, pulling the small knife. Finn didn't stop. He walked right into the point of the blade until it pressed against his expensive silk vest, right over his heart. He didn't blink. "Do it," he dared her, his voice a low, vibrating growl. "If you want to be free of me, Aaliyah, you'll have to stop this heart. Because as long as it beats for you. Every breath I take is an inventory of where you might be." He reached out, his hand trembling slightly as he cupped her cheek. The possessiveness in his gaze was no longer just about protection. It was a sickness. He looked at her like a man dying of thirst looks at water. "You ran," he whispered. "You made me hunt you through the gutters. Do you have any idea what I had to do to keep the triads from finding this place before I did? I've killed 12 men in 10 days to keep your location a secret." He took the knife from her limp hand and tossed it aside. Then he crushed her against him, burying his face in her neck. "Never again. I'm done being patient." He didn't take her back to the penthouse. He took her to a house in the woods, a fortress of stone and glass upstate, surrounded by miles of private land. "This is the end of the road," Finn said as he carried her over the threshold. He didn't put her down. He walked straight to the master bedroom where the fire was already roaring in the hearth. Aaliyah looked at him, seeing the raw, unhinged devotion in his eyes. He wasn't just a mafia boss. He was a man who had burned his world down just to make sure she was the only thing left standing in the ashes. "You're going to keep me here forever, aren't you?" she asked, her voice small. Finn set her on the bed, his hands moving to the hem of her hoodie. He looked at her with a terrifying, beautiful clarity. "I'm going to keep you until you realize that the world out there is nothing. I am the only world you need. I am your shadow, your shield, and your king." He leaned down, his lips ghosting over hers. "And tonight, Aaliyah, you're finally going to admit that you don't want to run anymore." The cabin was silent, save for the crackle of the hearth and the heavy, synchronized thrum of two hearts. Finn didn't move away. He stayed hovering over her, his weight a tether to a reality she could no longer deny. "I hated you every day I was gone," Aaliyah whispered, though her hands were already betraying her, sliding up the fine wool of his sleeves to find the heat of his shoulders. "Good," Finn rasped, his eyes dark with a hunger that bordered on the holy. "Hate is a passion. Hate means you were thinking of me." He kissed her then, and it wasn't the punishing conquest of the penthouse. It was slow, desperate, and terrifyingly thorough. His hands, usually so steady when holding a weapon, shook as they moved over her curves. He worshipped her skin as if it were a map to his own salvation. In the flickering firelight, the boundaries between captor and captive blurred. As their clothes were discarded like the remnants of their old lives, Aaliyah realized that Finn didn't just want her body. He wanted to consume her soul so that she could never belong to anyone else, not even herself. Morning brought a cold, sharp clarity. Aaliyah watched Finn sleep, a rare sight. Even in rest, his hand was clamped firmly around her waist, anchoring her to him. He was a beautiful monster, and she was starting to realize that the cage didn't feel like a cage when the bars were made of him. But the peace was shattered by the frantic chirping of a secure radio on the nightstand. "Boss," a voice crackled through the static. "The triads found the perimeter. They tracked the scent of the burner you used to call the cleaners. They're 10 minutes out. They aren't coming for the debt anymore, they're coming for the insult." Finn's eyes snapped open. In an instant, the lover was gone, replaced by the predator. He didn't panic. He sat up, his muscles rippling as he reached for the holster draped over the chair. "Aaliyah, get in the cellar," he said, his voice a flat, lethal monotone. "No," she said, standing her ground. "You said I was your queen. Queens don't hide in cellars while their kings bleed." The woods erupted. The sound of high-caliber rifles shattered the morning silence, glass spraying into the living room like diamonds. Finn shoved Aaliyah behind a reinforced stone pillar, handing her a compact Glock. "If they get past me, you use this," he commanded, "but they won't." He moved through the house like a wraith. Aaliyah watched through the gaps in the stone as Finn took down the first wave of attackers. He was efficient, a machine of death fueled by a singular obsession, her safety. But there were too many of them. The triad leader, a man named Chen with a jagged scar across his throat, stepped onto the porch, a grenade launcher slung over his shoulder. "Give us the girl, Park," Chen roared, "and maybe I'll let you die with your eyes shut." Finn looked back at Aaliyah. In that moment, she saw the choice in his eyes. He was ready to die to let her escape through the back. She realized then that his obsession wasn't just about control. It was a total, ruinous devotion. Aaliyah didn't run. As Chen stepped through the shattered front door, his eyes scanning for Finn, Aaliyah stepped out from behind the pillar. "Looking for me?" she asked, her voice steady. Chen smirked, raising his weapon. The collateral, finally. But his smirk died when he realized he was looking into the eyes of a woman who had spent 2 weeks learning how to disappear and 3 days learning how a monster loves. She didn't fire the gun. She threw the heavy glass decanter of gin she'd grabbed from the bar at the fireplace. The room ignited in a roar of blue flame, momentarily blinding Chen. It was all the distraction Finn needed. He lunged from the shadows, his blade finding the soft tissue under Chen's jaw. It was over in seconds. Finn stood over the body, gasping for air, covered in the blood of his enemies. He looked at Aaliyah, his expression shifting from shock to a terrifying, prideful smile. She wasn't just his prize anymore. She was his partner. New York looked different from the balcony of the penthouse. The city was no longer a place of fear. It was a kingdom. Aaliyah stood at the railing, wearing a black silk gown and the diamond tennis bracelet she had once tried to throw away. Behind her, the doors opened, and the lieutenants of the park syndicate filed in. They didn't look at her with hunger or judgment anymore. They looked at her with fear. Finn walked to her side, his hand coming to rest possessively on the small of her back. He leaned in, his lips brushing her temple. "The triads are gone. Your father's debt is erased in blood. You're free, Aaliyah. You can walk out that door right now and I won't stop you." Aaliyah looked at the open door, then back at the man who had hunted her, protected her, and ultimately worshipped her. She knew the truth now. The world outside was chaotic and cruel. Inside with Finn, she was the center of a dark, unwavering universe. She reached up, tangling her fingers in his hair, and pulled his mouth down to hers. "Close the door, Finn," she whispered against his lips, "and lock it." Finn's eyes flared with a triumphant, obsessive light as he kicked the door shut. The girl who answered the wrong call was gone. In her place stood the woman who owned the man who owned the city. What a whirlwind! Aaliyah thought she was running for her life, but she ended up finding a throne, even if it is a gilded one. But it makes you wonder, if you found a ringing phone in the back of a taxi in the middle of the night, would you have the courage to answer it? And let's talk about Finn. Is he a hero for protecting her, or is his obsession a step too far? Drop a comment below and let me know. Is Finn the ultimate protector, or is he the real villain of this story? I want to hear your theories on whether Aaliyah made the right choice by staying. If you enjoyed this high-stakes journey into the underworld, smash that like button to let me know you want more stories like this. Share this video with your friends who love a good, possessive alpha romance. Subscribe and hit the notification bell so you never miss a new story or a brand new series. Thanks for watching, and remember, in this world, some calls are better left unanswered. See you in the next one.